Welcome to a short preview of this Screencasts Online video tutorial.
In part 1 of this two-part tutorial, we looked at touring the interface, opening, saving and creating new documents, writing and formatting text, formatting the whole document into sections and columns, working with styles, adding and formatting images, and then we delved into a little bit of iOS functionality, including adding some tables. And I refer you back to that tutorial, which was tutorial number 725. So let's move on in this screencast and have a look at some extra functionality, including adding some tables, charts, and other sorts of objects into Word for Mac, adding headers and footers, and marking up documents on Word for iOS using the Apple Pencil. I'm really excited to bring you this screencast, so let's get started. So here we are back in our speed worksheet that we created back in Word for Mac and iOS part 1. And we're going to start adding some extra objects into this document now. So we've done a little bit of work on this, and I would refer you back to the previous tutorial for the type of formatting that we've actually done, including putting some page and section breaks in there, changing the columns to 2 columns instead of 1. And what I want to do is just make sure when I add a new table now, which is what we're going to do, is that we've got a little bit of room to play with when we're creating our new table.
That's just a quick preview of one of this week's Apple-related tutorials from Screencasts Online. Screencasts Online is your premium source of Apple-related video tutorials. All of our members get access to brand new, up-to-date tutorials each week, as well as unlimited access to our entire video archive full of Mac and iOS-related tutorials. You can stream and download all of our videos on your Mac, iPad and iPhone, and even your Apple TV using the members-only Screencasts Online Apple TV app. Membership also includes a complimentary subscription to the digital Screencasts Online monthly magazine, published each month and packed with videos, articles, reviews, as well as hints and tips covering all aspects of the Mac, iPad, iPhone, and all of the other fantastic Apple products. So, if you're ready to start getting the most out of your Apple devices, visit screencastsonline.com today and become a Screencasts Online member.